enhances is the kind of flexibility we have here from the MMC here, and the way everything is routed. So this part of this unit here allows us to turn on and off any of these pieces of analog equipment, to remove them from the chain, or equally change what position in the chain they're in. So these numbers can all be like rearranged so that we can completely rewire the studio for any kind of whatever we're trying to do. Not only that, but this section here allows us to monitor at different stages throughout the chain. So these are basically all of 3 D2As. This one is our output from Logic, the main 1 and 2 output. This one is output 3 and 4, which we will use in a standard setup. We'll have all the sources underneath on a separate channel, so that we can always listen back to the original source and make sure that any changes we're making are genuinely positive for that piece of music. And then our final D2A, which is the output of our record system here. So this is where we would kind of generally be monitoring what we're working at the very end of the chain. And then equally, this allows us to just listen to the analog gear. So it takes out any of the digital limiting on this side, so that we can just purely hear what's going on in the analog world. So because of that, we can kind of make our decisions based upon exactly what we need to do, really, and always be referencing how the music came in. Because as a mastering engineer, our job is not to change that mix, it's to enhance it, it's to prepare it, it's not to kind of pick something out and go, oh, the guitars are too quiet, I'm going to make them louder. Obviously that's a mixing decision, not a mastering decision. So with that in mind, we've got our first decisions in mastering as we would listen to the flat source. So for instance, just pop this track on for a minute, and we would listen to exactly how it came in from the artist, and in that time make notes about what we thought could be better. This project happens to be from an Academy Award-winning music producer, so it's all very, very well mixed. And with that in mind, our kind of the decisions we're making on that are going to be kind of different, because if you've got something that's mixed so well, it's kind of weird. We've got to just put the icing on it rather than kind of actually change anything about it. So it's always a balance between sort of understanding what the client wants and what the client needs, and making sure that we are enhancing and not inherently changing what they've done.
Yeah, we have one client in America who he does these wonderful recordings of cello and
the oboe, bass oboe, isn't it?
Bass clarinet.
Bass clarinet, sorry.
And they're recorded in various churches and so on. And they do all the editing and and all the rest of it. And then he sends it over here, and he just wants it put through the console. He just wants it to give it that thing. Mm-hmm. It's just literally one pass, and it just gives it, a sort of analog thing. Of course, it goes out of the digital world and then back into the analog world and back in again. So you've got, first of all, you've got your D2A converters, and then you've got your analog path, and then you've got your A to D, and he just says, see, what happens is that the A to D will immortalize what's in the analog thing, which you've also, but that's what's really going on, and it's to do with the A to D in many ways. That is to how it's portraying the sound.
Our process in mastering is like, before we're doing any EQ, before we're doing any compression, we're listening to the piece of gear and how they're affecting the music. And so, for instance, the Phoenix has 2 tube gain stages and imparts a nice harmonic distortion and has a nice warm bottom end and a sheen and a smoothness to it. And so before we're making actually any changes to anything, we'll be seeing how much we can get done with just the signal path. And that's kind of what, when people want things run through, there's a character of the D2As and A to Ds. And I was saying to the last one actually that a digital export, so a bounce from logic compared to something that's just been run through this, these HDs have an insane depth which you just cannot get in a digital. It's like the third dimension basically, and I guess it's just they're just more accurate at capturing lower level data, which you'd think would happen naturally in digital, but it's just not the same. And so yeah, we've got there's many ways that we can kind of affect the sound by driving these pieces of gear differently as well. So we recently changed the order to put our Phoenix mastering compressor right at the front, so that I can monitor the levels coming out of Logic, and then so I say there'll be 2 dB of headroom. If you drive into the Phoenix a little bit hot, so you're actually clipping the Phoenix. What happens then is you get is soft clipping, so it's not hard clipping like in digital when you're going to get a waveform that's squared off. You're losing electrons in the vacuum tubes, and so what that sounds like is a kind of warmth. It's kind of saturates. It makes things feel kind of warm and glued together. But equally, that can be the wrong thing to do if you're depending on your source audio and what's necessary. So yeah, the gain staging and the way they're driven. And likewise, the Manly Slam here at the end has a FET limiter, which is quite a fast limiter. But depending on how you're driving it, it can really change how the sound that comes out of it. And it likes being driven a little bit harder. So the difference between sort of it just giving it an extra dB on the way in can make it actually sound more present, bring more clarity to things. And so there's it's not just the equipment, it's how it's all being driven, it's kind of those decisions are being made as you're working. And obviously different genres of music require different treatments and different different processing. So yeah, on a standard album, we would basically, this is our setup, our standard setup on Logic. So basically here you've got each individual track, and then all of the raw sources that come out of a different process here, different set channels and things, we can monitor them on the different HD, or D2A, sorry. And we would sit there, usually listen through the whole album, and we would make notes per track on what's required, because first impressions are generally how most people are going to perceive this. So if your first impression is, well, that's a bit harsh, then it's important to kind of make a note of that, because if you sit there and you work on the same track and you listen over and over again, that objectivity kind of gets lost, and you can find yourself just going down rabbit holes and tweaking things that are completely unnecessary, when in actual reality your first impressions are how most people are going to be hearing this track. Not many people sit there and listen to the same track on repeat over and over again, unless you're a music producer yourself. And yeah, there's a few plugins that we might use on the start. So our surgical EQ for fixing any issues is the Kirchhoff, which is one of the most powerful digital EQs I've ever come across. I don't know if you've used this much, but it's got I can go right on this band to be a British Neve type, and that gives you Neve controls on it as well.
Yeah, wow.
And then and then it has so if you're using it down the bottom, it has a high pass filter on the top, so it actually mimics the characteristics of analog EQ points. It also has an absolutely amazing dynamic section, so you can set the dynamics. So say I want it to pull down when it goes over by this much, and then you can trigger that by another frequency. So the complexities are amazing. So I can say that basically when there's a 200 Hz snare, I want it to attenuate 4K, or likewise anything else. But that would be our kind of go-to for surgical stuff, or maybe some sort of mid-side, basic mid-side should we need it. But it's yeah, absolute powerhouse. And on the digital side, the only other thing we might do is add some light saturation, so some harmonics, black box or oven or something like that, just to kind of get it a little more present before it goes into the analog world. Then that would leave the logic via our RME AES card, and then runs into our analog system, where it will go through this path here, depending on how it's set. So at the moment it's set with the Phoenix in 1, goes Phoenix, EQ, MTC for the control, stereo width and levels. Then we've got 2 limiters, which are identical, but they are one's slightly older, I think, and so they have a slightly different sound. So we can choose which one we want. This one's slightly brighter and slightly cleaner. This one's kind of more musical and has more harmonic character. Then once that will go into our A to Ds here, and then or this box here, which I'll talk about in a second, and then be captured over here in our pyramid system. Now, obviously, one of the things that we've if you've got a track with, say, a dance track with a clean bottom end, like punchy, you may not want as much analog gear in the chain, if any at all. There have been instances where actual digital mastering was more beneficial than analog mastering for certain genres. But that's so we can kind of spend time experimenting with which pieces of equipment right and give us the kind of sound and the presence or the punch, etc. we want. Yes, and then we've got 3 A to Ds and 3 D to As, which are all the same but are running slightly different firmwares, and so they all have a slightly different sound and are beneficial for different things. One of them has a big kind of has a great stereo image and is more linear. One of them is kind of more focused and has a bit of a tighter bottom end. And these, I mean, they're very, very small differences between these things, but it's enough. A lot of what we do is sort of splitting hairs and kind of focusing on tiny details rather than to try and make the product the best it possibly can be. And yeah, a lot of what we do is a service industry, so we are kind of catering towards what the client's needs or wants are, and with that in mind, the client is right. And so if we send them a master and they would like it different, then it's their decision at the end of the day, and we're not going to be precious about that. We have had people in the past who we've done mastering for turn around and say, well, it's making my laptop speakers vibrate, and so I want all the bass filtered out up to 70 hertz. And it was a beautiful, I'm trying not to say the album, but I can't even give away the instrument without telling the album title. But yeah, so we went, are you really sure you want to do that? Because you're just trying to make it sound good on laptop speakers here, and it doesn't sound as good in the real world anymore, and that was what they wanted. So at the end of the day, we can only advise and give them our best kind of, yeah. One of the other really powerful tools we've got in the studio here is this EQ, which is running from an insert point here on this MTC, which allows us to do mid-side EQ, so which is really great for getting into, say, the effects or something. So a lot of the effects live in the side information, and so you can kind of add some top end to the reverbs, which can make things feel a bit more open, a bit more spacious, or equally affect just the vocal in the center or the drums or something, or DS without affecting cymbals on the sides. So it's kind of, there's so many different ways of doing things, and there's no right or wrong way. It's like with everything in music, that there's 100 roads to the same outcome. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's whatever works. Are you filming? Because I'm going to have to ask you to not film the audio, because we can't let client audio.
Oh right, yeah, that's fair enough.